before the katana gleamed beneath the rising sun, before honor was etched in blood, before the world even heard the word samurai, there were men with no title, no myth, and no script. They lived in rice fields, fought in forest skirmishes, died in silence. The origins of Japan's warrior class weren't born in ceremony, they were born in chaos, in a fractured land ruled more by family grudges and shifting alliances than by any central government. This is not the romantic version you've seen in films or the polished tales recited in temples. This is the real story, where hired thugs became legends, where loyalty was bought with grain and steel, and where violence evolved into a code that would shape an entire nation. In this episode of Japan Rewind, we rewind the clock over 1,000 years to trace the first footsteps of the samurai. Who were they? What forces birthed them? And how did they go from rural enforcers to icons of Japanese identity? Get ready. Because what you're about to hear is not just history. It's the echo of a time when one's fate was written not by emperors or gods, but by the sword in their hand. Before the samurai, the Heian roots. To understand the samurai, we must begin in the Heian period, spanning from 794 to 1185 AD. At this time, Kyoto, then called Heian-kyo, was the imperial capital. The emperor presided over court rituals, poetry, and spiritual rites. But he didn't rule Japan. Real power had already begun slipping into the hands of regional nobles, especially those in far-off provinces. These aristocrats managed tax lands and needed something the central court couldn't provide: protection. Enter the bushi. These were the proto-samurai, men recruited to protect estates, collect taxes, and suppress rebellions. They weren't nobles. Many were landowners, mercenaries, or disenfranchised peasants who knew how to wield a sword. Clans began raising private militias. Some of these militias were temporary. Others became multi-generational, a warrior lineage forming beneath the noble class, like tectonic plates waiting to shift. It's here, in this century-long quiet storm, that we see the outlines of the samurai take shape. They weren't yet bound by Bushido. They didn't have katanas, but they had something more powerful, a reason to fight. Whether it was defending their land, protecting their clan, or surviving an unstable regime, the early bushi became regional power brokers in their own right. And the imperial court? It mostly looked the other way, too absorbed in literature, calligraphy, and inner palace politics. This silence from above gave the bushi class the room to grow, and eventually, to dominate. Minamoto versus Taira, the war that made the samurai. By the late 12th century, Japan's imperial court was a fractured stage. The emperor still held ceremonial power, but the real drama was unfolding in the provinces. The two most powerful clans, Taira, Heike, and Minamoto, Genji, clashed in what became known as the Genpei War, 1180 to 1185. This wasn't just a conflict of swords, it was a civil war of identities, aristocratic elegance versus military dominance. The Taira had become influential within the imperial court, but the Minamoto, though once defeated and exiled, returned with vengeance and strategy. Led by Minamoto no Yoritomo, the Genji clan mounted a full-scale uprising. The war raged for 5 brutal years, marked by battles on land and sea, and culminating in the legendary Battle of Dan no Ura, where the Taira fleet was defeated and a young emperor drowned by his own protectors. The consequences were seismic. Yoritomo didn't just win, he changed the structure of Japan forever. In 1192, he was appointed shogun, establishing the Kamakura shogunate. For the first time, military power held legal and spiritual authority. The emperor remained in Kyoto, but he was now a figurehead. The real power, for the next 700 years, would lie in the hands of the samurai and their leaders. The Genpei War did more than crown a victor. It marked the moment when the samurai rose above their station, rewriting Japan's political, military, and cultural landscape. And the cost? Thousands of lives. An emperor lost to the sea, and a new world built on the bones of the old. The birth of Bushido. By the time the Kamakura shogunate was established, the samurai had become more than a class. They were an institution. But power without principle is dangerous. And so, the samurai began to adopt a code. This code wasn't born overnight. It emerged slowly. A fusion of Zen Buddhism's calm, Confucian duty, Shinto spirituality, and the practical ethics of war. This was Bushido, the way of the warrior. Its pillars: loyalty to one's lord, honor in action and speech, courage even in death, compassion balanced by discipline, and above all, a readiness to face death at any moment. Unlike Western knights who swore to kings and God, the samurai swore to clan, lord, and legacy. Their code was lived, not written, until centuries later when scholars and poets tried to define it in text. One of Bushido's most haunting expressions was seppuku, or ritual suicide. If a samurai failed in duty or brought shame, they could reclaim their honor by ending their own life, a final act of control in a world ruled by fate. Through Bushido, violence became ritual, death became meaningful, and the warrior became a vessel for something greater than himself. This wasn't just a military code, it was a spiritual blueprint that shaped the soul of Japan itself. The weapon that defined them. Long before the katana became the soul of the samurai, warriors used the tachi, a longer, more curved sword worn edge down and used on horseback. The tachi reflected the early samurai's mobile, mounted combat style. But as warfare shifted to foot soldiers and duels, the katana emerged, shorter, faster to draw, worn edge up. But the katana was more than a weapon. It was a symbol, forged in fire, hammered by hand, quenched with sacred water. Making a katana took weeks of craftsmanship. The best swords were folded hundreds of times, creating a steel so refined it gleamed like water and cut like thought. By the Edo period, only samurai were legally permitted to carry swords. The katana became their badge, a visible mark of their right to kill, their duty to protect, and their bond to the code. It wasn't just about slashing enemies. The katana represented discipline, focus, and identity. Samurai would practice unsheathing, cutting, and resheathing the sword for hours, days, years, perfecting the motion as a meditation. The sword is the soul of the samurai, the saying went, and for many, it was truer than breath. Their blade wasn't just sharpened steel, it was a mirror of their spirit. So how did a nation of poets and peasants give rise to one of history's most feared warrior classes? Through war, neglect, and necessity. Through the silence of emperors and the rise of clans. Through the muddy hands of farmers who picked up swords and never put them down again. The first samurai were not legends. They were living, breathing contradictions, bound by duty, driven by power, shaped by ritual. And yet, their influence echoes into everything modern Japan became. Its values, its aesthetics, even its silence. In the next episodes of Japan Rewind, we'll explore the darkest corners of samurai life, their betrayals, their obsessions, and the brutal truths behind their rituals. But for now, remember this. The samurai weren't born heroes. They were forged in chaos and refined by time. If this video opened your eyes to a side of Japan you've never seen, hit that subscribe button. Like the video to help others discover this forgotten world. And drop a comment. What surprised you the most about the samurai's origin story? This is Japan Rewind, where we don't just tell history, we awaken it.